Did you hear? Last night, on the top floor of Elysian Avenue 88, in that place they call the heart of the sky, the lights were on all night. Oh my god, you mean that place that's always empty? The private sanctuary of the top architect, Julian Hawthorne? The property fees there for one day are probably more than my whole month's salary. That's the one! And they say, a mysterious girl was escorted inside by a whole team of bodyguards in black, and she hasn't come out yet. Do you think she could be his secret lover? The news rippled through the city of Ethelberg like a stone tossed into a calm lake. And at the center of it all was the girl the whole city was talking about, Evelyn Reed. At this moment, she was sitting on an impossibly soft sofa, a cup of hot Earl Grey tea in her hands, her mind a complete blank. Let's rewind 24 hours. Evelyn's day should have ended sweetly. Amidst the aroma of flour and frosting, she had just finished the last unicorn cupcake for a 6-year-old's birthday party, the sweet scent of buttercream still lingering on her fingertips. Seeing the sparkle in the child's eyes as she received the cake, Evelyn felt, was the entire reason she loved her profession. Her bakery, the Sugar Quill, was a warm, sweet corner in this cold city. That evening, as she was humming a tune and preparing to close up, the shop's encrypted email chimed. There was no sender information, only a heavily encrypted IP address and a subject line that made her heart skip a beat. An order you can't refuse. The email was simple and blunt. Create a hyper-realistic fondant cake that perfectly replicated an 1888 first edition of The Count of Monte Cristo. The most crucial requirement was to write a single word, waiting, on the cake's spine, using edible gold leaf. The most outrageous part was the payment 7 figures. A long string of zeros followed, making Evelyn's eyes blur. It felt like a prank. But when she saw the 3D scan of the book in the attachment, she fell silent. The texture of the leather cover, the aged yellowing of the pages, every detail was demanded with absolute precision, and the specific request for the gold leaf word felt more like a secret code. This is too strange, Evelyn muttered to herself. Behind a high reward often lies a bottomless abyss. Her instinct was to refuse, but the bakery's overdue rent and the collection notices from the bank weighed on her like 2 great mountains. She had even started to consider taking a night job as a waitress. That string of zeros danced before her eyes like a devil's temptation. With that money, she could not only pay off all her debts, but also replace the creaky old oven in her shop. In the end, practicality won out over her unease. She took a deep breath and replied with a single word. Address. Half an hour later, an all-black silent hovercar pulled up in front of the Sugar Quill. It had no license plate, and its windows were one way, making it impossible to see inside. Clutching her box of precision tools, Evelyn's heart pounded as she got in. The cold air inside gave her goosebumps on her bare arms. The ride was silent, eventually stopping at Ethelberg's most prestigious landmark, Elysian Avenue 88. This was truly the pinnacle of the city, a place so high that ordinary people would get a sore neck just from looking up. Evelyn followed 2 silent statue-like bodyguards into a private elevator that went straight to the top floor. The slight feeling of weightlessness as the elevator ascended made her feel as if her own destiny was floating along with it. The moment the elevator doors opened, she thought she had walked onto the set of a science fiction movie. Enormous floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the sparkling night view of the entire city. The interior, however, was filled with artistic and structural beauty, displaying many exquisite architectural models. A cool, expensive fragrance filled the air, a stark contrast to the warm baked goods scent of her shop. A man stood with his back to her, looking out the window. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, his figure as straight and tall as a pine tree. Just his silhouette exuded a suffocating sense of power. "You are Evelyn Reed?" he asked, turning around. His voice was deep and magnetic. It was in that moment that Evelyn understood what it meant to be one of God's favorites. The man before her had features as deep and chiseled as a sculpture, and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. as if they could see right through a person's soul. He was the legend of the city, the founder of Hawthorne Architects. Julian Hawthorne, the man who had personally designed half of the city skyline. I am, Evelyn managed, trying to keep her voice from trembling. Julian's gaze fell on the toolbox in her hands, a playful smile touching his lips. You're brave. Aren't you curious about what's behind this order? I am just a baker, Mr. Hawthorne. My job is to make cakes, not to uncover secrets, Evelyn replied, her tone respectful but firm. Very well, Julian nodded, gesturing for her to begin. For the next few hours, in a kitchen that rivaled a professional bakery, Evelyn displayed her astonishing skills. She baked the cake layers, sculpted the book's shape with chocolate ganache, and covered it with perfectly colored fondant, using small tools to create the texture of leather and the layers of pages. Finally, holding her breath, she used the finest brush and edible gold leaf to write that single word on the spine, waiting. When the cake was finished, it looked like a genuine antique book, radiating a mysterious and magnificent glow. It's done, she said softly. Julian walked over and examined her work, a flicker of approval in his eyes. He said nothing more, simply snapping his fingers. An elderly man, who looked like a butler, handed him a black card. This is your payment. The password is your birthday, Julian said. But, Miss Reed, from the moment you accepted this order, you were no longer an outsider. Evelyn looked at him, confused. Just then, a harsh alarm blared from Julian's phone. He glanced at the screen, and his face instantly turned to ice. Marcus Thorne has made his move. He looked up, his sharp gaze locking onto Evelyn. He's faster than I thought. Miss Reed, for your own safety, I'm afraid you can't leave here for the time being. What? Evelyn's mind went into a tailspin. She had only made a cake. Why was her life in danger? What do you mean? I mean, Julian's voice was devoid of any warmth. That this cake you made was a gift for my old rival, Marcus Thorne. That golden word was to tell him that I have been waiting for his move for a long time, and he has just responded to my gift with an all-out cyber attack on my company's servers, and an accident at your bakery. My bakery? Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. Julian turned his phone screen towards her. On it was live security footage from the street where the sugar quill was located. A ball of fire erupted into the sky, and her small bakery, filled with sweet dreams and all her hard work, was instantly consumed by flames. The world went dark for Evelyn, and she almost fainted. Everything she had, her passion, her livelihood, was gone. The days that followed were like a bizarre, surreal dream for Evelyn. She was given a guest room in the heart of the sky, a room larger than her entire old apartment. The view from her window was of the clouds, but she felt like a canary trapped in a gilded cage. Julian gave her a new phone and a credit card with no limit, but he also gave her one strict rule: she was not to set foot outside the apartment. A nutritionist planned her meals every day, and a family doctor came to check on her health. She had everything money could buy, but she had lost the most important thing: her freedom. Why me? This was the question Evelyn asked most often. Because Marcus thinks you are my weakness. Julian's answer was always direct and cruel. He thinks you are my woman, so destroying your bakery was a warning to me. But I'm not, Evelyn retorted emotionally. You are now. Julian's eyes were bottomless. From the moment the whole city saw you walk into my apartment, you are. Evelyn collapsed onto the sofa, defeated. Her life, because of a cake, because of a single word, had been completely turned upside down. She had gone from being an unknown baker to the rumored girlfriend of a top architect, a pawn in a dangerous game. She tried to resist. She went on a hunger strike, but Julian always found a way to make her give in. He would place the photos of her burned-down bakery in front of her and say coldly, "If you want to go through this again, or if you want your friends to go through it, you are welcome to try walking out of here." Evelyn surrendered. She began to silently accept her situation, but the light in her eyes grew dimmer each day. At night, she would dream of the smell of baking bread only to wake up to the cold fragrance of the spacious room and hug her knees, crying silently. Julian seemed to be very busy. He often had video conferences in his study that lasted all night. Sometimes, when Evelyn passed by, she would overhear words she didn't understand, like structural stress, load-bearing wall counterattack, and urban planning sniper. She knew that a war without smoke was being fiercely waged. One late night, Evelyn couldn't sleep and went to the kitchen to bake some cookies. She saw that the door to Julian's study was ajar, and from inside she heard him coughing, trying to suppress the sound of pain. On an impulse, she pushed the door open and saw Julian leaning back in his chair, his face pale. The coffee cup in front of him had tipped over, spilling dark liquid all over a stack of architectural drawings. You. Evelyn was at a loss for words. Julian looked up and saw her. The guard in his sharp eyes softened for a moment. He seemed to want to say something, but another fit of violent coughing stopped him. Evelyn quickly walked over, grabbed some tissues from the table, and began to wipe the coffee stains from the drawings. As she did, she noticed that one of the soaked papers was not a drawing, but a collection of handwritten recipes. The handwriting was elegant, but the edges of the paper were singed. "What is this?" Evelyn asked softly. Julian's body tensed. "It was my mother's. The only thing she left me." His voice was quiet, with a barely perceptible fragility. "A fire. It burned everything. Only this handwritten cookbook survived, and even it was badly damaged." Evelyn felt a gentle pain in her heart, looking at the man who controlled the city's skyline. She saw for the first time a glimpse of the person behind the code symbol. "Maybe I could try to restore it," Evelyn said, looking at him earnestly. "My hands are very steady, and I know a lot about paper and ink." Julian looked up, his gaze deep and searching. In those eyes, usually as sharp as a knife, there was now a flicker of uncertainty. The next day, the badly burned cookbook was brought to Evelyn. For the following week, she completely immersed herself in the restoration work. She shut herself in her room, using the patience and precision of a master baker to piece together, reinforce, and fill in the fragile pages, one by one. This was more than just restoring a cookbook. It was like mending her own broken heart. In the process, she found a long-lost sense of peace and focus. When she brought the newly restored cookbook back to Julian's study, he was staring at his computer screen with a deep frown. "It's done," Evelyn said, placing the book gently in front of him. Julian's gaze shifted from the screen to the book. He reached out, his fingertips trembling as he touched the cover. As if it were a priceless treasure, the pages had been seamlessly repaired, and even the smoke stains had faded. He opened the book and saw the inscription his mother had written on the title page, "To my favorite little foodie." The handwriting was as clear as the day it was written. Julian slowly looked up at Evelyn, his eyes swirling with a complex mix of emotions: shock, gratitude, and a hint of tenderness that he himself hadn't noticed. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little hoarse. It was the first time he had ever said thank you to her, and from that day on, Evelyn felt that this gilded cage had started to feel a little warmer. As the days turned into weeks, a subtle change occurred in the dynamic between Evelyn and Julian. He no longer treated her as just a burden to be protected. He began to talk to her about his work frustrations over dinner. Though Evelyn didn't understand the complex mechanics of architecture, she was a good listener. She could see the heavy weight on his shoulders in his tired expression. One day, Julian's head of security brought some good news. They seemed to have located a keynote in Marcus's network and had successfully set a trap. To celebrate this small victory, and to give the long-confined Evelyn a breath of fresh air, Julian made a decision. "I'm taking you somewhere," he said, his voice tinged with concern as he looked at her increasingly pale face. "A place that is absolutely safe." That place was the Aerial Eden, an indoor botanical garden suspended in the middle of the city, designed by Julian himself and equipped with the world's most advanced security system. Evelyn finally stepped out of her luxurious prison and breathed in air filled with the fresh scent of plants. She explored with the curiosity of a child, marveling at the rare and exotic flowers. Julian watched the long-lost smile return to her face, and his own icy demeanor began to melt. However, neither of them expected that this so-called safety was in fact an elaborate trap. As they walked onto a scenic bridge made entirely of glass in the center of the garden, the specialized glass beneath Evelyn's feet suddenly cracked with a sharp snap, a spiderweb of fissures spreading out from under her. "Watch out!" Julian's face went white with terror. He lunged forward, pushing Evelyn towards the other end of the bridge, just as the glass panel beneath his own feet shattered. In that split second, Julian managed to grab onto the bridge's railing, his entire body dangling in midair, hundreds of meters above the ground. "Julian!" Evelyn screamed, her heart pounding with fear. She scrambled back without a second thought, trying with all her might to grab his other hand. Security guards swarmed in chaos, erupting around them. The bridge's structure appeared to have been remotely sabotaged, and an alarm began to blare, warning of its imminent collapse. "Go! It's going to fall!" Julian yelled at her, trying to shake her hand loose. "No!" Evelyn's eyes were filled with tears and defiance. "I'm not letting go." In that moment, she forgot her fear, forgot that she was just an ordinary person caught in a dangerous conflict. All she knew was that she could not watch this man fall. Finally, with the help of the rescue team, they were both pulled to safety. Back at the apartment, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Julian's arm was bleeding from a cut from the shattered glass, but he paid it no mind. In a fit of rage, he swept an expensive model off a table, sending it crashing to the floor. "I was too careless," he growled, his eyes filled with self-blame and lingering fear. "I put you in danger." Evelyn walked over, took out a first aid kit, and began to dress his wound in gentle silence. Her fingers were trembling, but her actions were steady and resolute. "It's not your fault," she said softly. "We both underestimated him, and now I can't leave. I have to help you, Julian. I don't want to see you get hurt again." Julian looked up and met her clear, determined eyes. The hardest part of him crumbled. He reached out with his uninjured arm and pulled her into a tight embrace. The accident had made them both realize that this war was far more brutal than they had imagined, and that they had become indispensable to each other. After the terrifying incident, Evelyn focused even more on restoring the old cookbook. It felt like the only thing she could do for Julian. One afternoon, as she was treating a badly scorched page with a special powder, something miraculous happened. Under the heat and chemical reaction, faint, almost invisible text, written in a special ink, appeared next to the recipe's handwriting. It was a secret message. Evelyn's heart raced. Using the knowledge of chemistry she had picked up from baking, she carefully revealed the hidden text. It was a diary entry from Julian's mother. The diary chronicled a shocking secret. Years ago, Julian's mother and Marcus' father had been close partners. They had co-developed a revolutionary energy-saving technology for buildings. But Marcus's father, in his greed to claim all the credit, had resorted to despicable means, even tampering with the circumstances of the accidental fire that took her life. The diary ended with, "If you are reading this one day, my son, do not be blinded by hatred, but you must find out the truth and protect yourself. The real blueprints are hidden in." The rest of the text was burned away. When Evelyn, trembling, showed her discovery to Julian, he froze. He had always believed his mother's death was an accident, and that his rivalry with Marcus was purely business. He had never imagined such a deep-seated, dark history was behind it all. "So that's how it was. That's how it was," he murmured, his eyes filled with pain and rage. Evelyn gently squeezed his hand. "Julian, now we have a direction. We're not just going to win. We're going to find the truth for your mother, and take back everything that belongs to her." Julian looked at her. This seemingly fragile baker had time and again lit a lamp for him in his darkest moments. She had not only restored his mother's legacy, but had also mended his shattered past. giving him the ultimate reason and strength to seek justice. From that moment on, their relationship transcended that of protector and protected. They had become soulmates, fighting side by side. Marcus's attacks are like ghosts. We can't find any pattern. It's as if he can predict all of our defensive deployments, Julian's head of security reported grimly in the study. Evelyn walked in with a plate of freshly baked madeleines, happening to overhear the conversation. She didn't want to interrupt, so she quietly placed the plate on the coffee table and turned to leave. Wait, Julian suddenly called out to her. Come and take a look at this. Evelyn was surprised. She walked over to the giant electronic screen, which was filled with countless lines of rapidly scrolling code and data streams that made her dizzy. See anything? Julian asked. Evelyn shook her head. How could she possibly understand any of this? Don't look at the code. Look at its form, Julian guided her. It's like when you look at a complex piping design on a cake, you don't just see the lines of frosting. You see its structure, its layers, even the minute differences in pressure at every point. Julian's words struck her like a bolt of lightning. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she opened them again, the code no longer looked like code data, but like a dynamic, ever-changing pattern. She tried to find a rhythm, a style, a signature of the attacker in the chaotic patterns, just like every baker has their own unique way of whipping cream. Minutes ticked by, and tiny beads of sweat formed on Evelyn's forehead. Suddenly, she pointed to an insignificant data node on the screen and said, There! The fluctuation frequency of this node is different from the others. It's mimicking the rhythm of our internal firewall. But at critical moments, there's a nearly imperceptible delay. Just like the momentary pause before a marine collapses. It's a fatal flaw. The security officer immediately pulled up the data for that node for analysis. A few minutes later, he looked up in shock. Mr. Hawthorne, Miss Reed is right. This is a perfectly disguised spy node. Marcus has been using it to steal all of our defense plans. The command room erupted in an uproar. No one could have imagined that a problem that had plagued them for months would be solved by a baker in such an unconventional way. Julian looked at Evelyn. His eyes filled with undisguised amazement and admiration. He knew that what he had found was not a fragile canary, but a rare gem waiting to be polished. Can you trace the source of this node? Julian ordered immediately. Yes, the security officer said excitedly. 10 minutes tops. 10 minutes later, when the physical location of the source IP address was displayed on the screen, all the color drained from Evelyn's face. The address pointed to none other than her own The Sugar Quill Bakery, specifically to the computer of her most trusted assistant and former crush, Liam Vance. It was Liam, the man who had quietly helped her carry sacks of flour and wash baking pans when she was struggling to start her business. He was the one who had tampered with the cake order, who had sold her information to Marcus, who had, with his own hands, started the fire. The realization was more painful than the destruction of the bakery itself. I want to see him. Evelyn's voice trembled, but her eyes were fiercely determined. Julian looked at her in silence for a long moment, before finally nodding. All right. 3 days later, the annual Future of Architecture Summit, Ethelberg's most important event of the year, was held at the convention center. Marcus Thorne was a guest of honor, scheduled to give the keynote speech. The highest level of security for the event was provided by Hawthorne Architects. In a dressing room backstage, Evelyn came face to face with Liam, who had been invited by the bodyguards. He looked haggard, and when he saw Evelyn, he couldn't meet her eyes. Why? Evelyn's voice was hoarse. Why? Liam suddenly became agitated. I did so much for you, but all you ever saw were your stupid cakes. I was sick of being poor, and I was sick of you ignoring me. Mr. Thorne gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, and he gave me a chance to make you stay with me forever. Jealousy and possessiveness, such terrible sins. Evelyn's heart turned to ice. You didn't destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Evelyn said, before turning and walking away. She knew that, from this moment on, she had said goodbye to the naive, weak girl she used to be. On the main stage of the summit, Marcus was passionately describing his vision for his architectural empire. On the giant screen behind him, a promotional video for his company was playing. Just as his speech reached its climax, the image on the screen flickered and switched to a decryption progress bar for an encrypted file. The color drained from Marcus's face. "What is going on?" he roared at the backstage crew. But it was too late. The file finished decrypting, and what appeared on the screen was evidence of all of Marcus's business crimes over the years, including excerpts from his father's diary on how he had orchestrated the fire and stolen the technology, as well as records of his own illegal data trading. The evidence was irrefutable, laid bare for all to see. This was the elegant and deadly counterattack from a baker. The entire hall fell silent, then erupted in a massive uproar. Flashbulbs went off like crazy. Marcus stood on the stage, his face ashen. His empire had crumbled in an instant. However, just as the security guards were about to take him away, Marcus suddenly turned to Julian in the audience and gave him a strange smile. "You think this is over, Julian? I have a gift for you. A gift you will never be able to get rid of." His words were like a poisoned dart, striking fear into the hearts of everyone present. The joy of victory was instantly replaced by a sense of foreboding. Marcus's downfall did not bring the peace they had expected. On the contrary, a fiercer storm was brewing. The gift Marcus had spoken of was a carefully forged chain of evidence that traced the core patent of the energy-saving technology developed by Julian's mother to an overseas shell company, with Julian himself cleverly disguised as the ultimate beneficiary. At the same time, a fake invoice showing his mother embezzling public funds was also leaked to the media. Overnight, Julian went from a hero seeking justice to a villainous schemer who had stolen his mother's legacy and framed a business rival. The stock price of Hawthorne Architects plummeted. All projects were suspended, and debt collection notices from banks came flooding in like snowflakes. Julian's world had collapsed, even more completely than before. He changed. He stopped sharing any information with Evelyn, locking himself in his study all day. His eyes bloodshot. He became irritable and paranoid, like a caged beast. "You should go, Evelyn," he finally said one late night, his voice as rough as sandpaper. "It's not safe here. I can't give you any kind of future. Take this card, go somewhere no one knows you, and start over." "I'm not leaving." Evelyn's eyes were red. "We said we would face this together." "Face what? How can you face this?" Julian's voice suddenly rose, his eyes filled with a despair Evelyn had never seen before. "This is my world, full of betrayal and schemes. What does a baker know about any of this? If you stay here, you will only be dragged down with me, and we will be crushed together." The words, "What does a baker know?" struck Evelyn's heart like a knife. Looking at this man, so changed by hatred and pressure that he seemed like a stranger, she felt a true sense of powerlessness for the first time. So, in his heart, she was still just an outsider who needed to be protected, who knew nothing. "Fine, I'll go." Evelyn's heart grew cold, and tears streamed down her face silently. She didn't take the card. She just turned and quietly packed her few belongings. As she walked out of the heavy doors of the heart of the sky, she looked back at the gilded cage that had once held both fear and warmth for her. But now it was just cold. She was free, but she felt more abandoned than ever before. In the days after leaving Julian, Evelyn rented a small apartment and made a meager living by baking for her neighbors. Every day, she followed the news about Hawthorne Architects, her heart aching as she watched it teeter on the brink of collapse. She didn't believe Julian was the person the media portrayed him to be. She decided to find out the truth on her own. She remembered the burned words in his mother's diary. "The real blueprints are hidden in." Hidden where? Evelyn studied the restored cookbook over and over, searching for a clue. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a recipe for Grandma's apple pie. Next to it, his mother had written a note. "The taste of home is the beginning and the end of everything." Beginning, end, home. A bold idea flashed in her mind. She immediately started researching Julian's mother's life and found the address of her childhood home. The house had long been abandoned and was scheduled for demolition. Evelyn knew she had to go there. Late at night, she slipped past the media and entered the dusty old house alone. The air was thick with the smell of decay. With a flashlight, she followed the descriptions in the cookbook and found the old-fashioned fireplace. Behind a loose brick, she felt a cold metal box. Inside the box were the long-lost original blueprints, and on the back of the blueprints was a complete technology transfer agreement, handwritten by his mother, naming Julian as the beneficiary and bearing the official seal of a notary. This was the proof. However, just as Evelyn was about to leave, overjoyed, a dark figure blocked the doorway. It was one of Marcus's men. It turned out he had also figured out the location and had been waiting in ambush. Evelyn's heart sank. She clutched the metal box tightly and backed away towards a window. There was no escape. Just as Evelyn had lost all hope, the door of the old house was smashed open with tremendous force, and Julian burst in with his men. He was covered in dust, his eyes blazing with fury and fear. It turned out that he had sent Evelyn away only to protect her. Afraid she would become a target for Marcus's remaining henchmen, he had been secretly having her followed and protected, and when he learned that she had gone to the old house alone, he had rushed over in a panic. After a chaotic fight, the thugs were subdued. Julian ran to Evelyn, and seeing that she was unharmed, he could no longer contain his emotions. He pulled her into a tight, desperate hug, as if he wanted to merge her into his very being. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He apologized over and over, his voice choked with emotion. "I shouldn't have said those things. I was just so scared of losing you." "I know." Evelyn sobbed and smiled in his embrace. "I know." The next day, the original blueprints and the transfer agreement were made public. All the lies fell apart. Julian not only cleared his name, but also in his mother's name, shared the groundbreaking technology with the world. Free of charge, Hawthorne Architects was reborn from the ashes 1 year later. On the outskirts of Ethelberg, a building made of glass and wood shimmered in the sunlight. It was shaped like a blooming flower, made of frosting, full of whimsical charm. This was the Sugar Quill, 10 times larger than the original, equipped not only with top-of-the-line baking equipment, but also with a dessert museum open to the public. Evelyn, dressed in a clean chef's uniform, was carefully placing the last sugar rose on a wedding cake. The sunlight streamed through the glass windows, casting a gentle glow on her. Julian came up behind her and gently wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on the top of her head, inhaling the sweet scent that always surrounded her. "What are you busy with?" "Constructing a piece of sweetness." Evelyn smiled, putting down her tools and turning to hug him back. Having endured tests of life and death, crises of trust, and a forced separation, their hearts were now so tightly bound together that nothing could ever tear them apart. "Evelyn," Julian said, taking a velvet box from his pocket. He opened it, and inside was not a diamond ring, but a delicate, platinum-plated baking spoon. "I once thought my world was made only of cold, hard steel and concrete, until you came into it with your sweet fragrance and built the warmest structure for me. I have used my life to design this sugar quill for you. Will you use your life to mix the sweetness for the rest of mine?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She smiled and nodded emphatically. The night had once come, but it had to pass. The sun, shining through the ruins of the fire, brought not only new life, but also a love story that spanned skyscrapers and ovens, blueprints and recipes, a romance that after enduring so many hardships had become unbreakable.